All right. Oh, good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have everybody here together, and thank you so much, Reverend Boylan, for you were always the top.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Wow, anytime. I would bring the pancakes right to you. But, I'm glad to see everybody, and I want to be able to let you know next month, November 2nd, we have Karen Tyler, who is our Director of Veteran Services, will be here with us to talk. So, and we'll still be here. We expect construction on the new senior center to be done. Construction to be done by the end of November. Wow. And then we'll plan the move in. So I'm thinking that December's men's breakfast, we may still be here, and I may not have a speaker in case we can be there, and I can. Good. It just may make it a little bit more flexible for me, but we'll still have breakfast. and then as soon as possible, we will, be planning to move and getting settled in. But right now, it looks fabulous. They put in the new entrance door, so we have a new front entrance. They've cut the doorway in from the new reception area into the hall. Kids from Whittier are back, and they've been working on studding and are now hanging some of the sheetrock so that they can finish. The Mike Anderson's crew from the school department is working with them too, that they will finish the other side. Well, they'll do the insulating, and then the kids might be able to do the other side of the sheetrock. If not, Mike's crew will be. But Ambient is working, still finishing the HVAC, the electric, heating, ventilation, and cooling. They will also do the acoustical ceilings as that work is done. The electrician is still in working and rough wiring. But, and the plumber is done, I believe, but there's still some tiling to do in the men's room. So it's all the pieces are coming together. And when you were there for our construction meetings, it's just amazing to me, how everybody works in sync. And I have to say, what the kids are able to do from Whittier is absolutely fabulous. So, and Mike has been, he's just been so helpful and so supportive, and his guys are great. But the crew working from Ambient in Newburyport has been very, very good. And our architect has been fabulous, having to almost sometimes redesign on the spot when we find that the as-builts don't quite match what's actually there. They want to cut that hole, for the door to go from the reception area to the hallway. And suddenly, there's a beam. Yeah, that was unexpected. So.
What I usually tell people as an architect, whatever you get for a completion date, add 4 to 6 weeks to it, automatically.
Exactly.
For any surprises.
So we've really, it's been wonderful to see taking place, and I just, it's nice, it's really wonderful to see people's enthusiasm for the space, and, and the offers of help as we, get things going, so it's coming together. But I'm going to turn this to Bill so we can, you've got time to be able to talk and ask some questions. Sure. Thank you so much.
No, I really do. I don't just say it. I really do enjoy this. I appreciate coming. Of course, I know a lot of you guys. No, it's good. I try not to be repetitive. It's hard, I only have one story. I've been here for this is the only place I've ever served as a pastor. I came here in '69, so I've had a lot of time to ruminate, meditate, and learn about the area. Although I wasn't very far away anyway in the beginning. I came from Ipswich, so it wasn't a long trek to get here. So as I was thinking about today, and I didn't want, as I say, to just tell you the foundational story of how we came to be and how Georgetown came to be and all around us and some of the events. I was thinking back to an experience Miriam and I had, it must have been a year ago, when Chris Kaminsky took us through Union Cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
That was a very interesting walk. And there were so many stones there that had their story behind them that were interesting. And of course, I think most everybody knows, or maybe you don't, that Cuffy Dole was buried in the dead center of that cemetery over there. And then down here, if you go to Harmony, there's the same thing. You got John Purley and some other graves. But I bet one of the least known of our Georgetown cemeteries is out by us, right across from the Byfield Parish Church. That's a Georgetown cemetery. Beside the Byfield Parish Church is the old parish cemetery, which is doubly interesting in some ways. I thought, well, maybe this morning it might be interesting to you for me to pick out some of the people that are buried there and tell you just a snippet about their story, and then I'll try to do it without being too elaborate, so if you do want to ask me any questions on specifics, you can do that. Let me just say, so again, we're all on the same page. When I talk about Byfield, I'm talking about the Byfield Parish Church, which is there, Governor Dummer Academy, which is there. If you go down Route 1, and where Central Street comes in from Rowley, which crosses the highway, you have the first fulling mill in America. Well, the Byfield Parish Church is in Georgetown, the Dummer Academy is in Newbury, and the first fulling mill is in Rowley. And you say, well, wait a minute, I just thought you said they were all in Byfield. And they are. Because Byfield's not a town, it's a district from the church, 2 miles in every direction, that includes everything in that 2-mile radius, and that would include Dummer, that would include the old mill, and everything in between, Long Hill, we can go on and on. But just so you'll know that when I'm talking about even the Byfield Cemetery, I'm really talking, in a way, about Georgetown as well. And the cemetery across the street is a Georgetown cemetery. So I thought, well, you can't deal with everything in a half hour, that's for sure. So I took the 6 basic periods, the colonial period, who's buried there, then the more revolutionary or early USA period, the Industrial Revolution that we experienced here in New England, the westward expansion, and then the early 20th century, which is very interesting. And finally, I'm going to give you just a word or two about my own experience since '69. So let's see if I can do that within a relatively brief compass, and then not just run away, but if you have questions in specifics of something I may have said or not, explained to your satisfaction, I'll take a crack at it. I think a lot of you know, and I just repeat it again, that I had an opportunity, it's almost 10 years ago now, it was 2007, to deliver a paper at Oxford University, or at least at Oxford, on the Oxford Roundtable, and I titled it the Byfield Parish Church and the Forming of the American Mind. Because, again, one of our pastor's sons was critical in getting the federal Constitution ratified, because he's the one that really changed John Hancock's mind from wanting to be the most powerful governor among independent states to wanting to be one governor under a president of the United States. That was a big deal for John Hancock. He felt he was losing, well, certainly he was losing power. And John Hancock thought a lot about himself. If you ever look at the Declaration of Independence, it shows when he wrote his name, right? Yeah. But anyway, I delivered a paper that was a little more broad than that, and it looked at our area, and particularly at one man in our church, but it looked at our area because as one of our earlier spokesmen or orators at Byfield, he came for our 200th anniversary. We've already had our 300th now. But at the 200th anniversary, a descendant of our first pastor was Moses Hale, and by the way, his daughter married the first pastor here at Georgetown. So there's that connection. But when this Edward Everett Hale, who was then America's very famous orator himself, came to Byfield to speak, he said, it's long since been observed that Newbury, Newburyport, West Newbury, and Byfield, which is our end of it, form a sort of confederacy, and from this confederacy, nearly every name known to history in America has originally sprung. That's quite a statement. Yeah. And of course, he's making it in 1902, not 2002, but still, nobody stood up and challenged him. He was basically right. If you look at the Northeast up until that period, this was where the movers shakers lived. Well, when you go back to the old cemetery, the one beside the old church, we built a new one in '88, but the old church, there's a very interesting stone. It's the first one in the cemetery. It's the first woman buried there. Her name was Mehetabel Moody. And what's interesting, if you read her stone, now you think you're in Puritan times. You're back in 1702. The witch trials have only happened 10 years, 10 years earlier, 1692. I mean, you're really back there. And it says on her gravestone, settled the worship of God in this place. Puritan woman found the first independent congregational church in America. That is an interesting fact. People think have all kinds of ideas, all kinds of stereotypes, all kinds of, in many ways, even false notions of the Puritans and who they were. It's very interesting that this first church in America that was independent of the government, that's what the independence meant. They had their own money to use for their own church. They didn't need to take and contribute their money to the towns and then get it back as a return of their taxes, which is what it would have been. Nope, they could use their own money for their own pastor and to maintain their own building. They were independent in that sense. And it's the first time in America that happened. The Pilgrims down in Plymouth and the Puritans here until that point followed the English model, when that was the parishes would contribute money to the government, and then they would of course get their portion back to support their pastor and property. That was not Byfield. Byfield was on its own. That's very interesting. But it's doubly interesting that it was a woman who founded that church. Also, if you go a little away from her stone, you'll see a series of stones for the Longfellow family. The Longfellows began here in this general area. They were in along the Parker River. And one of them, Stephen Longfellow. And Stephen Longfellow is the village blacksmith of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem. It took me a while to catch on. When I first became pastor in the old church, we had a library, and I didn't connect it up. It said the Longfellow Library at the Byfield Parish Church. Well, as I got to know the lay of the land and the history, I came to know that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow visited Byfield a lot, because the family farm was still in possession of his cousin when Henry was alive, and he dedicated this poem that's so famous now, The Village Blacksmith, to his great-great-uncle, who was Stephen Longfellow, and his stone, as I say, is in the old part of the Byfield Cemetery. Also, there's another very interesting stone there. It's for a little girl, really, a 12-year-old girl who died of smallpox, Sarah Durant. Now, the church itself, or the church folk, the members, put that stone up. It's quite impressive. It's not just a stone like you see other stones or one that's set in the ground. It's really a monument. And it's to Sarah. Sarah was the daughter of Henry Durant. And Henry Durant was our fifth pastor. Henry Durant was a Finnish scholar. He taught his Sunday school classes Hebrew. These farmers out here in remote old Byfield, they could read their Hebrew Bibles if they wanted to because of him. He had friends. Now, these names won't necessarily mean a lot, because if you're not in theological or even pastoral circles, there's no reason to, unless you just happen to know from history. But if you do go down through Connecticut, you'll see a sign on the highway that says the House of Horace Bushnell. Horace Bushnell was very influential, to say the least. But he was relatively famous in his time 150 years ago. And he was a good friend of Durant and came often to Byfield. But the really interesting thing about Durant is, when he lost Sarah to disease, he never recovered. He really couldn't function any longer as a pastor. He just couldn't do it. And the church tried to help him out in a number of ways. That he was a teacher also at the academy, Governor Dummer Academy in those days, the Governor's Academy today. But back at the Governor Dummer, he was a teacher. Then he just couldn't keep his mind was not gone by any means, but he just was so devastated by the loss of this little daughter. And then they tried to get him into a business where he could function, but he really couldn't function. And so eventually, in fact it was during the gold rush, he got on a boat here in Newburyport, and I don't know, I'd love to know the whole track. It must have been a long journey. He went all the way around and up to San Francisco on a ship. He got out and he went to Oakland. He became mayor of Oakland, I think in 6 terms, but the interesting thing is he founded the University of California at Berkeley. And he's the 5th pastor of the Byfield Parish Church. So it's a very interesting thought. Now his his stone isn't there, like I say, but the little girl's in. The little girl's stone is out in the old cemetery. Now, in the next period, I think of it, beginning about 1810, 1820, we had an industrial revolution. Things began to dramatically change there, and manufacture really became better and easier and more automated and all of that. And one of the really important inventors was Paul Pillsbury. He was called Peg Pillsbury, right, because he invented a way to produce the shoe peg with machinery, because before that, cobblers had to carve them. They would cut a piece of wood. I think they used something like oak, and then they would carve it and they pegged the boots and they pegged the shoes. I've seen it not done particularly, but over in the Rowley Historical Society, they have examples of boots with the shoe pegs in them. But Peg Pillsbury, he was really an interesting man. He lived to be 88 years old. He was born in 1780, 4 years after the Declaration of Independence, and he lived till 1868. He had a number of children, but he invented a corn sheller, so you could really deal with corn again without all the labor that was necessary before that. I think it was a bark crusher of some kind. I read it, I tried to understand it, but anyway, it crushed bark. And it did it well. But he invented the shoe peg. And it was for that he got his nickname, Peg Pillsbury.
Could I add just
Oh,
one
sure.
more point to that? Peg Pillsbury sold the pegs that were produced in his machine for 9 cents a quart and made an absolute fortune.
Yeah, and a lot of his, as I understand, a lot of his inventions were never patented, so he lost a lot of that. But yeah, he did well on that. But he lost his kids. That was the bad thing. I don't know. He was a pretty harsh father. One of his boys dressed up for Sunday morning church, but underneath he had his other clothes. And when he got away, he took those clothes off and shed them, and he went to sea and became quite a famous sea captain. So he apparently had his mind on his work and not on his family. I don't know. This is, again, another very interesting fact. It's a little earlier than Peg Pillsbury. But down at the Byfield Falls, it was the first time in the world, as I understand it, first time in the world that nails were ever made by machine. They were machine-made nails in 1796 down at the Byfield factory. And that factory continued on into the 20th century, not making nails necessarily, but it was there. And before that, if you wanted to build a house, you had to get the guy like Stephen Longfellow, the blacksmith, to make your nails. They were hammered out, and after that, they were mass produced. So, yeah, that was 18. And then, of course, in this beginning of this early period, because what's his name, Cutler, the pastor of the Hamilton Church, which was at that time the hamlet of Ipswich, became Hamilton later. Manasseh Cutler led the migration west. He was about the first one. They went out and founded Marietta, Ohio, and they started that westward movement with a vengeance. And this was late 1790s. But one of the persons that is in the, now I'm crossing the street to the Georgetown side of the cemetery. He's not buried there. I'm sure he's buried out in Montana. But the stone is there for John Ogden. He was adopted, I understand, by the Dresser family, but he died with Custer at the Little Bighorn. He was in the 7th Cavalry, and his stone is in the Georgetown Cemetery across the street from the church. Also in that cemetery is the stone, which is like a monument to William Henry Moody. William Henry Moody is a direct descendant of that Mehetabel Moody that I spoke of earlier, who founded the Byfield Parish Church. One of her great-great-great-grandsons was William Henry Moody. William Henry Moody was, first of all, at the beginning of his real ascendancy to, I'll call it fame, he was Secretary of the Navy under Teddy Roosevelt. He was Attorney General of Massachusetts, and as Attorney General, Well, it may have been before he was Attorney General, but anyway, when he was a prosecuting attorney, he prosecuted Lizzie Borden. He was the prosecutor in that trial, lost the trial, but he was the prosecutor. And then eventually, he was appointed by Taft. Taft wanted to be, he didn't want to be president, he wanted to be on the Supreme Court, Taft did. But he got roped into being president of the United States, and he appointed Moody to be Associate Supreme Court Justice of the United States, and that's all on a record of his track record, anyway, on his stone. And he's buried out in the Georgetown side of the parish cemetery. And we got a letter, years ago now, the Supreme Court was locating, affirming a location of all their justices. And we got a letter asking us if we could vouch for the fact that William Moody was in our cemetery, and indeed he is. He's resting there. Another interesting person that I stumbled onto this, well, I guess I stumbled onto it. The Caldwells are an old family. They're on the way out of, if you're familiar with Jackman Street, then it turns into Elm Street in Newbury. And you know where the Caldwell sold all that property, and now there's a big housing development there on the left? I don't know. What's it called?
Caldwell Farms.
Yeah, I guess it's called Caldwell Farms. Well, before all of that, that was really a cornfield, and Mrs. Caldwell was still alive. I used to visit her at the house. She belonged to the church. And on her dresser was a picture, or on her cabinet there, was a picture of her husband on the team that was the American team for the 1936 Olympics. Wow. And he was pictured there, I believe it was Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe and he were on that team that ran, I think it was Germany, it was Hitler, I think, got to the Olympics there in 36. So David Caldwell, not the David many of you would know, that I would have known, was in Byfield at the time, where his dad was on that Olympic team. Well, what I did yesterday is just kind of roam through the cemetery back and forth to be sure I try not to forget anybody. But I'm going to give you 3 stones that are important to me personally. You know, I've been there 47 years. And I really absolutely believe, and believe it more than I ever have, that God appointed me to that church. I wasn't just appointed to be a preacher or a pastor or writer or I was appointed to that church for a reason. I believed it. And I don't know, I don't want to make this too much, but I had a sense of it. That's a better way to put it. I had a sense of it when I came, but after I've been there, a lot of evidence has proven that was God's call. Number one, the first pastor of Byfield Parish Church is my 5th cousin. Yeah. 8 generations removed. I'm the direct descendant of the first pastor. We are the only 2 pastors in the 314 history of Byfield Church who have been there over 40 years. He served 41, I'm in my 47. He was ordained on November 17th in 1706. I was born on November 17th in 1939. I do believe there's some, corroborating evidence here that I'm not blue skying it. That I really believe that I was called to that task. Well, there's a stone in the cemetery that proved it to me. I'll tell you what it is. You can think about it for yourself. But Olive Hewson, name you've doubtless never heard of. Olive Hewson was a very elderly lady when I came. And when I came, because I was still in school, I was a student when I came here. I had no experience, and I had never been in a church. I was a student in the seminary. And I was given the leave of not beginning to actually preach until May, till I graduated, though I was hired in January. They signed me up in January and said, okay, you can wait till May so you can do your work and not be, conflicted here trying to do your studies and do this. But they gave me a list of people and said, but there's these 5 or 6 families or persons actually who really want to see the pastor. Would you visit them? And I said, of course I would. So Olive Hewson was my first visit ever. Now I had signed up to preach and teach, not visit ladies, especially elderly ladies. And my wife, by God's grace, had grown up in a pastor's family, and she loves to talk forever. And she said to me, don't worry, just go and start the conversation and we'll listen. And then when it's over, pray for her and leave. Okay, so I was very comforted. But I didn't expect what happened though. Oh, I went to the, I'll tell you the whole story if I have time. Let me look.
Sure.
We have time. Okay. Okay. I can do it in 5 minutes. So I went to the door, and I knocked on the door, and her husband came, and I did not know, nor did anybody ever tell me that he was entering some dementia. So I knocked on the door, and I said, I'm the new pastor of the church. Your wife would like to visit me. I mean, like me to visit her. He says, my wife doesn't want to see anybody. So I thought, well, now my wife is strike one against my wife, who thought it would be so easy. No. And so I hear this little voice down in the back of a dark room in a salt box house over by them. And I hear, let him in! Ralph, let him in! And Ralph is standing at the door, he's blocking my way, so I don't know what to do. Go like he's being sent away, or listen to this lady who wants me to come. Well, because he was really in the stage of the dementia, he lost track of what was going on, he walked away. So I went in. And I went way down, and she was sitting with a shawl and a rocking chair in the back of the room. And she summoned me over, and to get a chair to pull up close, because I suppose she didn't hear well. And she grabbed my hand, and she said, oh, she said, I have so wanted to meet the man who's going to bury me. Now I'm doubly undone. I wish I had listened to Ralph. And left. So what do you say? What do you can't say, well, I hardly wait. It's not an easy thing to answer. So anyway, somehow it went fairly well. But I would go back and see her, and then it choked. Now it's over years now. She really thought, she had a heart condition, she thought she was on the verge of dying then. That's, remember, 1969. And so, as our children came along, and then my wife would come, and we got very close to her, and it's a long saga, really. But it shows you the love that can come in a church when Christ is present. They had to be put into a nursing home situation because they couldn't function. And my wife and I went up to visit her. It was their wedding anniversary, and my wife brought a cake to the nursing home. Now they were in different rooms. That was not good. But then she said, "I'd like to have this cake cut for the people in the room, whoever, but particularly for the Houston." That was their name. And they said, "Oh no, it's off the diet." My wife says, "She's almost 90 years old. Can't you just have a piece of cake?" No, I guess it was the law of the land. But the path of the Congress about that. So anyway, so my wife was really frustrated that they were in separate rooms. They couldn't do this, they couldn't do that. They couldn't see each other. She came back and talked to the women of our church and the Methodist church. And for the next 3 years, the churches brought them back in the home and took care of them every day for 3 years. Put them back in their home, visited them every day with a meal, had nurses come in and check on them every 3 days, all their laundry, people that it was a volunteer situation, and they kept it until the day they died. In that home. And it's the day they died that's really important, so at least I bring the whole thing up. And remember what she said to me, "You're the man who's going to bury me." And I was in my 7th year now at Byfield, and Byfield had agreed that I would have a sabbatical leave every 7 years, and I had signed up, enrolled, to go to classes at Edinburgh University in Scotland for the summer. And we were flying out on this, actually it was Easter Sunday afternoon. We were flying to Edinburgh. And we would be gone for 4 months total, 3 months of sabbatical and a month of vacation. So we were not going to be back till the 1st of October, or maybe September, I guess it was, 4 months. And so on Wednesday night, in fact, we had been there. I'd say 2 things. If you go to the church, you tap me on the shoulder, I'll take you up and show you. She was an artist, and she taught kids to paint. And she had done a painting of our church back in the 50s. And all the years, the 7 years, she would say periodically, oh, I want you to have that painting. It was on her wall. Well, I wasn't about to go over and take it and say thanks. But that particular Wednesday, she had it down by her chair, and it was wrapped in brown paper. And so my wife brought the meal. We left, and that night she died. She died that night. The funeral was Saturday at 2 in the afternoon at Woodward up in Newburyport. Maybe you remember that exactly. And if she had not died that night, I would not have buried her. 7 years later. And I thought about it a lot. I said, you know, I don't think that was accidental. Fairfield was a very difficult church for anybody, particularly a young student, to survive. And we made it 7 years. And it was a totally different church than it was the day I came. And I think God put it in her mouth to tell me what I wouldn't have known and couldn't have interpreted then. You'll be here the day I die. And that won't be for 7 years. That was just a kind of confirmation. Well,
Did you get the painting?
huh? Oh yeah. Painting is beside my wall, my study wall. If you go in, look at my door, the painting's right there. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It was supposed to hit 10:30.
Yep. Wonderful.
Okay.
Wow.
I read an article somewhere a short while ago that the cemeteries down there, that nobody, those are private, nobody's supposed to go in there. Is this true? or
Oh,
what?
no, it's not true that it's private. It is true that it's privately maintained. Now, I don't know, Joe, you may know even more about this, because it was part of, there were two functions, there's the church and the parish. And the parish had responsibility for the cemetery, but the parish dwindled. And they asked the church to take it, so we became responsible for the cemetery. Now, it's private in that sense, but not private in the sense that anybody go in there.
You could go in and.
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I encourage you to do it, 'cause it's very interesting.
Did you do a quickie on Cuffy Dole? Because a lot of people don't realize that this guy is in the union.
Yeah, well, I don't know a lot about Comfy after what Chris said that meeting. I don't remember everything, but I do know that there was still a period in time when we were very racist. And Cuffy was black, so they put him on the edge of the
Other
cemetery.
side of the stone wall.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
put him over the side of the cemetery. The cemetery grew, he's now dead center.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a clue that we.
The message is, them out, but you're still there.